My name is Rick Bloodworth. This is the Common Sense Christian Financial Channel. It is Tuesday, March the 3rd, about 2 o'clock Central Standard Time. Thought we'd go over the silver market prices for the day, and then I want to get into the main topic, which is collectible 90% silver. And so just as a quick update, we opened up at about $89.21, I believe, was the actual opening. We went as high as $91.46, and then we just completely collapsed, went down $14 to $77.87 on the London market. And we've recovered some, but we are still below an intermediate support line that we've been looking at for about a week now. We've dropped below the 84.52, which had been the low. Right now we're at about $83.20. So we're down about $6 for the day. Again, we've got about 2 hours left before the market closes, and so we'll see if that support line holds or not. One of the things I always look at on the support lines or the resistance lines is, are they broken with conviction, and will the market settle above or below that line for a couple days running? Certainly this broke it with conviction. We've remained below this line for most of the day, as opposed to many times where we just have a quick dip and right back up. We've been below this line most of the day, and in fact we're about $1 below this line, so keep an eye on that. We've had pretty good volume today as well on the futures markets, and so just keep your eye on this. If we don't get back above 84.52 sometime tomorrow and stay above that point, then I think your next support line is going to be somewhere around $70. And that's pretty a firm support, or it has been for the last couple of months. And so if we start challenging that, that will be something to keep your eye on. I've had a number of people that have really talked about the idea that they believe that the market's being manipulated right now, that war should bring higher prices in silver and gold, and sure enough, very often they do. Silver and gold, particularly gold, are considered safe haven assets, and so to see them act in the exact opposite way that you would expect them to can sometimes be a little bit disconcerting, and it can make you wonder what's going on. And certainly we've had enough manipulation in this market through the years to make that be the first prime suspect on that, but this happens during times of war. I remember back during the Gulf War, I had taken out a futures contract on the COMEX silver. We had bombed over in Iraq, and everything just immediately went up on the overseas market, and then it looked like the war was not going to be very long, or it was not going to be that hotly contested, and silver just shot down. I was lucky to be able to get out the next day, but I learned my lesson on that. I tried not to ever anticipate the direction that silver might take during these times of crisis. And so just something to keep in mind. Very often the market will act in the exact opposite way that you think that it will. You might have excellent reasoning for the direction that you might think the market should be going in, but I can assure you the market doesn't consult us, and it doesn't know our reasoning. The market just does what it does. And very often, those who are in a short position are the ones with the deepest pockets. They're the ones that have been doing this for the longest, and they're also very much aware of where the stops are in any given market. And so if they decide to try and put downward pressure on the market, they are able to do that. And very often when that happens, the market will start hitting various stops. People will have to sell out of their position, and as they do, the downward pressure gains momentum. That may be a little bit of what happened today. As far as whether this is long-lasting or short-term, nobody knows. I suspect that it's probably not going to be overly long-lasting. We've certainly seemed to have stabilized a little bit above that $77 mark, but time will tell on that. So again, I wouldn't get too carried away with it. If you're a long-term investor and you're planning on just buying a certain amount each month over time, then times like this should be looked at as an opportunity to buy the silver that you are planning on buying anyway on sale. Obviously, if you are hoping to sell for a short-term profit, then this will interfere with your plans considerably, and you just have to kind of roll with whatever we're going to be going with right now, because whether we have manipulation or if this is just a natural market reaction, it does not matter to your bottom line. So I guess the best caution would be to be careful about what you're doing. Don't use borrowed money, and certainly I wouldn't be speculating during times like this, because it's awful hard to be able to predict the market. Now, I wanted to talk about 90% silver today. 90% silver has long been my favorite form of silver. Now, I certainly like owning American Eagles and different sovereigns like Canadian Maple Leafs and Australian Philharmonics and things like that, or Austrian, Philharmonics. And I like the 999 silver. It seems like the Buffalo Round, even though it's generic, has received pretty good demand over the years. And 90% has a way of falling in and out of favor. Clearly, we are out of favor right now. We looked at some prices yesterday that were showing that the dealers around the country really are hesitant to buy 90% silver. The best price I saw yesterday as far as a dealer offered to purchase 90% was $14 below spot. And so that's a pretty significant hit on 90%. I saw another one that was down as low, I believe, as $22 below spot price. That's the dealer telling you they really don't want your 90% silver. They'll buy it if you insist upon selling it, because they'll still provide the service, but they're not going to risk their neck on that. And so they're offering quite a bit below what has typically been market value. But right now, it looks like about 15 to 25% below melt price is where the fair market is right now on 90% silver. So does that mean it's a terrible investment? Does that mean that you should get out of it? To me, it does not. But again, I'm a much longer term investor than most people. I very often have a holding period of decades. And so it really doesn't matter to me if we have different premium price structures through the years. I don't remember ever worrying about that before, and I'm really not concerned about it now. Silver is so far above where it was just a year ago, even with the premium hit on 90%, that we're still, most of us, still doing pretty well. But if you've been buying 90% for speculation purposes and you were hoping that the market would go up in times of war, well, I'm sure you're disappointed, and maybe you want to rethink your strategy on that, because 90% is not a very good speculative instrument. It's something that will typically cost you money just buying and selling to the same dealer at the same time, and so you need to be careful with that. But having said that, 90% silver has some really attractive aspects to it, and that's what I want to talk about today, because 90% is where a lot of us got involved with silver in the first place, or gold, from the collectible side, the numismatic side. And 90% silver has a huge numismatic following. And so I thought I'd talk just a little bit about that today. The obscure coins, or the ones that are no longer in circulation, include the silver 3-cent piece, the silver half dime, and the silver 20-cent piece. All of those were just minted for, except for the half dime, a very short mintage period, and usually a very small amount. And so those obscure issues of silver, the 3-cent piece, the half dime, and the 20-cent piece, we're not really going to look at today. That's more of a strictly numismatic area. And so if you're interested in collecting coins, then that might be one of the areas you want to look at. As a matter of fact, I recently picked up an 1876 20-cent piece. Now, I bought it for about $30, and so I assume that it is counterfeit. But if it is, it's a pretty good counterfeit. It's not magnetic. It weighs about the right amount, but the idea of getting something that has a mintage, and in this case, the mintage, I believe, is like 14,750 50 coins. And so this would be considered ultra rare if this is a real or a genuine coin. And I'm sure before I ever sell it, I'll make sure I get it graded and establish whether or not it is genuine. But this is just one example of sometimes you can find a pretty good deal on a rare coin. And again, 20-cent pieces are somewhat of a numismatic oddity. It's got a very limited collector base, but for those who collect it, they're very serious about that. So that's one area. The other areas that most of us are more involved with are just what many call junk silver. Anything that costs, what would it be, about 40 times face to 60 times face right now cannot be considered junk, but it's just referred to as that because for so many years it was just held in $1,000 face value bags, and many times the bags were just filled up and tossed on the floor. A lot of old coin shop dealers remember walking around on mounds of those 90% silver bags. That's how they treated it, was as junk. But as the years have gone by and as the cost of silver has gone up, it's pretty much lost that aspect of it, even though it has not completely lost the name. But the constitutional, if you want to call it that, 90% U.S. silver is any silver coin minted before 1964, and the regular coinage, that has about 71.5% silver content, or about 71.5% of an ounce for face value, would be the half dollar, the quarter, and the dime. The dimes that we're interested in obviously would be anything that was minted before 1900. If you have a dime that's minted before 1900, it's probably going to have more collector value than it has silver value, especially if it's in decent condition. But those dimes, if you find something like that, just set it aside, especially if you have something from the early 1800s or the 1700s. But the dimes primarily consisted of the bust dimes that were minted, I think, until about 1837, something like that. And then the seated dimes were minted from 1837 until about 1891. And so you probably have seen some seated dimes if you have collected 90% for any length of time, and maybe even some bust dimes in that. But most of us are more familiar with the three major types of dimes, beginning with the Barber series. And the Barber series, or the Liberty Head dime, was minted between 1892 and 1916. And again, anything from the 1800s, I would check the quality on it. If it's got pretty good details, I would hang on to that. As a matter of fact, the Barber coinage, I just hang onto anyway, unless it was so worn that you could barely see the details or read the date. But always check for valuable coins, because the Barber series or Liberty Head series, whether we're talking about dimes, quarters, or half dollars, have got some pretty spectacular rarities amongst that series, especially within the quarters. And so be sure and get you a proper book that will help you identify them. I always like to get a big red book. I don't rely on the red book for values because it is retail, and I'm not interested in paying retail for anything. But these big red books that were issued in the early 2020s are so big, and they have such good pictures and such good information that I just like to pick them up every once in a while if I can find one for about $10 or less. And so this is a great resource. It'll give you a lot of information. It'll give you the mintages, and it will even show you the condition of the coins. But again, that's the red book. I use the blue book for my values. Blue book is one that is essentially the wholesale price, or what a dealer would expect to pay another dealer for a coin, or maybe even what a dealer might pay you for the coin. It wouldn't be retail, it would be more of a wholesale value on that. But I like the blue book because when I'm looking at coins, especially on eBay, I like to see what the value is, what a dealer would pay me for it. The red book is not going to show you that. The red book will be somewhat inflated from what a dealer could afford to pay you for it. And so keep a blue book on hand. Something like this costs maybe $12 or $15, and it's just a really good resource. I usually get at least one every year, and I wear them out. The next coin book that I really would recommend if you're going to be a collector is something like this. This is a grading by photographs book. It's by Q. David Bowers, and David Bowers is one of the great coin experts in modern times, and he just has a series of pictures of the coins all the way through the book, and you can just kind of look at your coin and see what condition coin in that picture best matches your coin, and that will very likely, by photo grade, tell you about what quality or condition that coin is in. Now, it's not going to tell you whether it's cleaned or not. You're going to have to get used to being able to distinguish clean coins from non-clean coins, but just a general rule of thumb, if it's not graded and it is an older coin, especially 1800s or before, you can just assume that it's probably been cleaned at some point. You can recognize a harsh cleaning because there will be hairline scratches or sometimes even marks from somebody that's used a wire wheel or something like that. And so always check and see if it's been cleaned, if you can tell that. And again, something like a photo grade book is a really excellent resource to keep on hand. And then I like the current editions of the gray sheet. The gray sheet is put out by the company that bears that name, and that's going to tell you pretty accurately what a dealer would pay you for your coins in the different condition that you might have your coins in. And so keep a gray sheet on hand, especially if you do a lot of buying and selling. So anyway, getting back to this. As far as the dimes, the three major dimes that you're going to come across are Barber. I would hang on to all my Barber coinage, Mercury dimes, and the Mercury set, the better the quality, the more you want to save that Mercury dime. But the rarities are 1916D, 1921, 1921D, I think the 26D and the 31S, and the 1942 over 1. Anytime you see a 1942, get you a magnifying glass and look and see that last digit, because there were some overdates on that. They printed 42s on top of the 41 planchet or dimes that they had minted the year before. And so this is somewhat of a rarity and can be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. But that's the Mercury dime. The Roosevelt dimes that we're interested in were minted from 1946 to 1964. There are really no rarities within this set on the common mint. Some of the proofs might be a little bit more rare, but typically you're just looking at bullion value for the Roosevelts and for most of the Mercury set, with the exception of high quality Mercuries. The quarters that you're going to be looking at are the standing Liberty quarters, and especially anything minted before 1925. If you've got a clear date on a 1924 or before on a standing Liberty quarter, be sure and put that aside. It's going to very likely be worth well more than melt value. 1925 to 1930 are pretty good coins as well if they have good dates and if they're in good condition. A lot of these standing Liberty coins come without dates, and dealers are going to give you pretty far back of melt on those, even compared to what they would give you for a coin that was in better condition. So watch the dates on the standing Liberty. Didn't mention the Barber, but the Barber came before that. Again, 1892 to 1916. Anything with a clear date or good details, I would hang on to. There are three major rarities in this set that are worth hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. So get you a blue book or a gray sheet or even a red book, and you'll see which ones of these are the rarities. I think they're the 1896S, the 1901S, and the 1913S. But there's also some pretty good Barber coins in addition to that, the 1914S, the 96S, 97S, and so on. So get you a book and and look at the values on that. The Washington quarters began minting in 1932. They're still in mintage, but we're interested in the ones that go to 1964. The only rarities within the Washington set are the 32D and the 32S in average circulated condition. If you find a really nice Washington quarter from the 1940s or 1930s, hang on to it because you might have a pretty good value coin. And then we have the half dollars. Again, the Barber half dollars or Liberty Head half dollars have some pretty nice coins within that set, some pretty high value coins. So again, get you a coin book and look at that. The next set is the Walking Liberty half dollar. I believe it's the most beautiful of the U.S. coins. And there's several rarities in that. The 16D and S, the 17S and D with the obverse mint marks. The 1919s, if they have a clear date, are usually a little more valuable. The 21 and the 21D especially are the most rare of the Walking Liberty set. And then the 38D is fairly easy to find, but they made less than 500,000 of those coins. So the Walking Liberty set is one I would just look at the quality of it, if it's been cleaned or not, and anything that was good quality or good condition I would keep with an eye out for those dates. The Franklin half dollar set, there's no major rarities. The 49S in really nice condition can run you a pretty good amount, but for the most part, it's not a real high mintage set to begin with. It's probably undervalued at that, but you can find them pretty readily. And then, of course, the last half dollar of our interest is the 1964 Kennedy half dollar. They also made 40% in 65 through 1970. The 1970 is a little bit rare, but the 65, 66, 67, 68, and 69 are just common date 40%. You have to go to 64 and before to get the 90%. One last thing. One of the reasons that I like 90% so well is when the market goes up. When we were up over $100, I was able to get some pretty nice sets, collector's sets, for about melt and sometimes under melt. There's just a couple of sets that I really liked. I got a Liberty Head quarter set, all but the three major rarities. Within that set, I got it for a little over melt. I got a complete Washington quarter set, including the 32D and S, right at melt. And then I've gotten a lot of Walking Liberty half dollar sets at melt, a complete piece dollar set at melt, including a 1928 that had been graded. And then I've also picked up some different Morgan dollars, a little bit more silver content in the Morgan and piece dollars, but they're very collectible, so look and see the date on those as well. Well, that's the video for today. I thought I'd just kind of give you an idea, a glimpse of the exciting part of the numismatic portion of the 90% side of buying your silver. I really like the collectible side. It's one that gives me more enjoyment than anything else, and it's also one that even if the market goes down, if I got it for a good price and I've got some rare coins, the silver content does not make as big of a difference in that type of a situation. So anyway, that's the video for today. I hope this gives you some ideas. Hope it helps. Let me know what you think in the comments. Certainly appreciate your watching, and I appreciate all of you who have subscribed. Hopefully we'll see you again next time. God bless.